Good morning. So for this summer, we have been walking through the stories in the book of Genesis. But we have been looking at these stories in Genesis through the lens of Hebrews chapter 11. So we've been looking through the lens of one of the last chapters in the Bible to look at some of the first stories in the Bible. And the reason that this has been so helpful is that it has really just brought this truth to the forefront, that what God is looking for more than anything else from us is looking for faith. We cannot please Him through our works, or we cannot earn forgiveness through our works. What makes us right with God is our faith. But not only are we identifying that truth, we're also then digging in a little bit deeper, because as we look at these stories, we begin to understand what kind of faith God is looking for. That is crucial. Faith is kind of a mushy concept in our culture, and everybody has their own definition of it. But God has something specific in mind. And I've loved it because as we've dug into these stories, we've seen how incredibly tangible and how incredibly practical real faith is. Again, we're learning about faith from the original followers of God. So we're seeing faith in its original form. That's why we're calling this series Vintage Faith. And it is anything but mushy, and it goes way beyond an emotion. We've been learning that it impacts every area of life every day. We saw that in the life of Abel, who showed us that what we give God reveals where He truly is in our life. Whether we give Him our best first or we give the leftover later, that is a true indication of where God sits in our priorities. And then we also learned that with vintage faith obeys God. Even if what God is calling us to doesn't make sense. Even if what God is calling to is going to take a lot of hard work over a long period of time, we still obey. And if we have vintage faith, we're still going to obey God even if we're the only one. We saw that in the life of Noah. In the life of Abraham, we saw several things. We looked at his life for 3 weeks, but one of the biggies was that vintage faith holds nothing back from God. He has an all-access pass to our life. He has no limits. He has access to everything and to every area of our life. Now, last week we started looking at the life of Jacob, who was Abraham's grandson. And again, if there was ever a poster boy of how we are not saved through our works, but we're saved by faith, it's Jacob, because Jacob's life was incredibly messy. I don't think it was helped by the fact that his parents named him Jacob. What Jacob means literally is to grab. And we saw how that's how he went through life. If he saw something, he grabbed it. Even if it meant outmaneuvering someone, if it meant scheming, even if it meant deceiving someone. He just took what he wanted. He was a grabber in life. The slang of his name means liar. And that doesn't help him out either. It's like, gee, mom and dad, talk about giving your kid an uphill climb. But we saw how this played itself out in his life. Jacob worked his brother Esau, his older twin brother, over the coals, and he outmaneuvered him, and he talked his older brother out of the birthright, which the birthright gave him a double portion of the inheritance, and it gave him the right to lead the family after their dad had died. Now that's a pretty valuable thing. So what did Jacob use to talk Esau out of the birthright? Bowl of soup. He got all of that just for giving Esau a bowl of soup. And you know, when Esau kind of looked back later on that arrangement, he's like, hey, he took advantage of me. Well, then he really pulled a whopper on Esau when he later pretended to be Esau and went into their father's tent. Their father was very old at this point. He was blind. And Jacob deceived Isaac into believing he was Esau so that Isaac would give him the fatherly blessing, which sealed the deal when it came to receiving the birthright. After that happened, that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And Esau was like, when the days of mourning for my father are over, I am going to kill him. But their mother Rebekah had heard about this, and Rebekah favored Jacob over Esau. So she goes to Jacob, says, Jacob, you need to flee, you need to leave here and go to the land of Haran where my brother Laban lives. And go under the auspices that you're going there to find a wife. And as we wrapped up last week, we were looking at where Jacob had just left home. He was out on his own. He was out in the wilderness. He was vulnerable. He was exposed. But he went to sleep one night, and through a dream, he had a powerful and a personal encounter with God. And there God introduced himself. I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, the God of your father Isaac. Because evidently, Jacob didn't know the Lord as his God yet. But as a result of that encounter, Jacob made this vow saying, God, if you do these things that you're promising me, if you bring me back safely to this land like you're telling me, then you will be my God. In other words, I won't just know you as the God of my father Abraham. I won't just know you as the God of my father Isaac. You will be my God. I will trust in you. I will follow you. I will place my faith in you. Which showed us really the first essential ingredient to vintage faith, which is this: vintage faith has to be personal. Otherwise, you're just settling for religion, but God isn't looking for that from us. He wants this real, close relationship with Him where we walk through each day with Him and He guides us. It has to be personal. Now, today we're going to look at another extraordinary encounter that Jacob has with the Lord. And it's not going to happen all that far from where the first one took place, but it's going to happen way down the road. It's going to happen 20 years later. So go ahead and turn to Genesis chapter 32, which if you're going to look in the Bibles in the racks, that's page 27. This time Jacob isn't fleeing from the promised land. Now Jacob is returning to the promised land. Again, 20 years have gone by, so let me fill you in with all that's happened while you're turning there. Jacob ended up arriving in the land of Haran, and he found his uncle Laban. He went to work for Laban, herding sheep. And it turns out Jacob was really, really good at herding sheep. It's because the Lord was with him. The Lord blessed him. So Laban really prospered by having Jacob in his employ. So after a few years, he approaches him and he says, Jacob, what do you want for your wages? Well, Laban had two daughters, Leah and Rachel. Leah was the eldest. Evidently, she wasn't quite as good looking as Rachel was. Rachel was the real looker. And now back then, and there's a number of theories as to why, but back then it wasn't taboo to marry close relatives like this. And so Jacob goes to Laban. He says, I know what I want for my wages. I want your daughter Rachel as my wife. And he proposed working 7 years for her. 7 years, that is a long time to wait to marry the woman that you love. But in what's maybe one of the most romantic lines in all of the Bible, it says, Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seem like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Aww. Right? Can we just sigh together, all right? Aww, that's so nice. Well, the day finally came, and Jacob worked his 7 years, and so he came to Laban, and he said, give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her. I'm like, oh, that's like very direct language for speaking to your father-in-law, right? But here, Jacob gets a taste of his own medicine. Remember, Jacob, he sort of made his way through life by scheming, by outmaneuvering, outfoxing, even deceiving other people. He's very clever. Here he gets an idea of what it's like to be on the other side of things. The wedding celebration occurs, and evidently Jacob gets very festive. But that night, Laban sneaks his daughter Leah into the tent instead of Rachel, and Jacob makes love to Leah, not realizing what's happening till he wakes up in the morning, and he's furious. And he comes to Laban. How could you do this to me? Why did you deceive me? I wonder if there was any part of him that's like, oh, I wonder if this is how Esau felt. I wonder if this is how my dad felt. And Laban went, fooled you. No, not really. He appeased Jacob, and he said, Jacob, look, it wouldn't have been right for me to give my younger daughter away in marriage before my older marriage. So let's make a deal. You can have my daughter Rachel in marriage too. If you wait to the end of the bridal week, you can marry her, and if you work another 7 years. Again, Laban was getting very, very rich off of Jacob. And I don't know if Jacob really had a choice, but he agreed to that. As you well know, trust is the foundation of any relationship, and now that has been obliterated between Jacob and Laban. And over the next 7 years, things deteriorate to the point where finally Jacob gathers up his family and he flees. Come on, Jacob. He never gets to leave anywhere, does he? He's always fleeing when he leaves. I think that kind of says something. Laban gets wind of it, and he sets out to apprehend Jacob. But before he catches up with Jacob, he has an encounter with an angel, and the angel warns him not to harm Jacob. Maybe Laban was thinking of killing Laban and just taking all of Jacob's possessions, but Laban cooled his jets, and the next morning they met, and Jacob and Laban ended up establishing a treaty with each other, and Laban allowed Jacob to go along with his daughters. And so God protected Jacob in that situation, and now Jacob is entering into the promised land. Only problem is that so far as Jacob knows, the promised land is hostile territory as well. Because remember, when he left, Esau was planning on killing him. And when his mother sent him away, he said, I want you to go to the land of Haran until the coast is clear and I send a note for you. But as far as we know, Rebekah had never sent that note. So it really might be a case of Jacob getting out of the frying pan and jumping into the fire. That leads us up to Genesis chapter 32. Hopefully you're there by now. Let's find out what happens next. Jacob also went on his way from that meeting with Laban, and the angels of God met with him. When Jacob saw them, he said, this is the camp of God. So he named that place Mahanaim. Now, we're not sure what the angels said or why they met with him, but it had to be a huge, huge encouragement. It had to be a reminder that God is with him. It had to be a reminder on that eve before he entered the promised land of his last night in the promised land where God showed up to him. And now all those promises are in sight of being fulfilled. Still, there could be a real danger here. And that nagging fear that Jacob had had for those past 20 years, now he has to face them. That's the thing about fear. It doesn't just go away. And you really can't defeat fear mentally beforehand. To really conquer a fear, you have to face it. You have to walk through it. You have to push through it. Victory isn't found on the near side of fear, it's found on the other side of working through it. Kind of reminds me of my daughter Hannah and what she decided to do this summer. See, when we lived in the Black Hills, one of our favorite things was to go cliff jumping. And there are so many great places that you can do. You jump off these cliffs into these beautiful, cold, clear lakes. It's awesome. And so we loved Hippie Hole. That was one of our favorite places. We loved to go to Jenny Gulch in Pactola. Most of these jumps, they would range like 15 feet, maybe even one was 6 feet, get up to 20 feet, maybe 25 feet. But at Pactola, there was a jump that was 50 feet. In the dry years, it would get up that high. Now, I'd say that one made me think a little bit before I would jump up there. Well, Hannah, when we first moved there and went to Hippie Hole, it took a long time for her to get the gumption to do that jump at Hippie Hole, which is somewhere between 15 and 20 feet. In fact, I was swimming in the pond waiting for her, and she'd give up, and then she'd say, no, Dad, wait for me. So I was swimming there, about got hypothermia. I was so cold by the time it was done. But she finally did that jump, and she started working her way up, and this last summer, she decided, finally, it is time to conquer my fear of this 50-foot jump. We were out with several families from our church here out at Summer Retreat. But again, you don't conquer fear by just looking at it. And Hannah made the mistake of looking over the edge. And you don't conquer your fear that way. And you don't conquer your fear thinking about it. She had to think about it a little bit. In order to really conquer that fear, you got to face it. You got to push through it. You have to jump in order to do it. And finally, Hannah did it. She jumped. Yeah, can we give Hannah a hand? She's in the back room, but yay! Way to go, Hannah. I think she might have said as she came back out, I'm never doing that again. But she pushed through it. So ask yourself, are there some fears that you need to face? Until you do, it will always be there. It will gnaw at you. It will eat at you. You won't conquer it beforehand. You've got to step through it. Is there a fear of conflict you have, and you need to step into that conflict? Is there a crucial conversation you've been avoiding, and you just need to go there? Is it a fear of going to the doctor, but there's people counting on you? Is it the fear of putting that application or putting your name out there, taking the risk of going for something? What is it? Push through it. You conquer it on the other side of that fear. Jacob, it's time for him to face his fear. Verse 3, Jacob sent messengers ahead of him to his brother Esau in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. All right, so Jacob, he decides, I think it's going to be better if I give Esau a heads up instead of just surprise and showing up. So he does that, and he instructed his servants. This is what you are to say to my lord Esau. Wow, very humble language here. Your servant Jacob says, I've been staying with Laban and have remained there till now. In other words, no, Esau, I've not been hiding. I've just been in Haran. I've not been slinking in the shadows in fear. I've not been avoiding you. No. I've been busy. And not only has he been busy, he's been productive. Verse 5, I have cattle and donkeys, sheep and goats, male and female servants. Esau would have understood this to mean, I have plenty, Esau, don't worry, I'm not coming to take anything from you. Now I'm sending this message to my Lord that I may find favor in your eyes. In other words, Esau, I don't want to fight. Past is the past, let bygones be bygones. So Jacob is clearly extending the olive branch to Esau here. And that's a pretty good start. I think he's being very, very diplomatic. So how does Esau receive this message? Verse 6, when the messengers returned to Jacob, they said, we went to your brother Esau, and now he's coming to meet you. And 400 men are with him. How do you think Jacob received that news? I don't think he was thinking welcome wagon when he heard the news. 400 men are coming with Esau. Verse 7, in great fear and distress, Jacob divided the people who were with him into two groups, and the flocks and herds and camels as well. He thought, if Esau comes and attacks one group, the group that is left may escape. Now, just a few verses ago, Jacob had to be feeling very good, very secure. All right, he had survived fleeing from Laban. The angels had appeared to him and met with him right before he went into the promised land. And yet, isn't it amazing how quickly our sense of security, our sense of safety can evaporate? It can go just like that. And this little piece of news, this changes things really, really quick. So he is scrambling his people. He's scrambling his flocks. It's not all he did. Verse 9, he prayed. And when you read all of those chapters between where we left off this week and what we're looking at now, you'll see that this is the first recorded prayer we have of Jacob since that first encounter he had with God. But at least he's praying. Now, I know I've experienced this, but have you ever prayed this kind of prayer where you are vacillating, and you're vacillating between what you know you should pray and what you really want? Oh, dear God, I know you're in control. What's going on, Lord? Where are you? And Lord, I know that I deserve absolutely nothing for it, but please help me out here. Jacob prays that kind of prayer here. Then Jacob prayed, "O God, my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac." It's interesting, he's back to that again. "You who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper." So now he's like seeking leverage against God. He's trying to remind God of his promises as if God needed him to remind him. But now he regains himself a little bit. "I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you've shown your servant. I had only a staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I've become 2 camps. But then he gets to what he really wants. "Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. Oh, but you've said," so he's reminding God of his promise again, "but you've said, I'll surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted." So he prayed. Might not have been the most proper prayer. You can see fear breaking through the cracks in this prayer, but it's an honest prayer. And at least he did pray. And after that, verse 13, he spent the night there. And from what he had with him, he selected a gift for his brother. Okay, so he prayed, but he acted as well. I think that's just this amazing combination, right, where we pray and yet we act. We know it's beyond our control, yet we do what we can. He's aware he can't save himself, and yet he's going to do what he can do. So first he sends messengers to Esau. When that didn't work, seemingly, he prepares a gift for Esau. And it is no small gift. Look at what was all in this. 200 female goats and 20 male goats. 200 ewes and 20 rams. 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows, and 10 bulls, and 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. This is a huge gift. This was larger even than what kings would exact as tribute from villages. It is that big. It is so big of a gift that if Esau had had the worst of luck and had lost everything in those 20 years, this would totally set him up to start over. It's that big. It is so big that if Esau had hired mercenaries to come and attack Jacob with the promise of booty, this would have been enough for him to pay those mercenaries off. Right? Jacob didn't want the obligation to pay these guys to get in the way for Esau forgiving him. So this is a shrewd maneuver here on the part of Jacob. But he's not just shrewd in giving such a large gift. Look at how he sends this gift to Esau. Verse 16, he put them in care of his servants, each herd by itself, and said to his servants, "Go ahead of me and keep some space between the herds." He instructed the one in the lead, "When my brother Esau meets you and asks, 'Who do you belong to and where are you going? And who owns all these animals in front of you?' Then you're to say, 'They belong to your servant Jacob. They are a gift sent to my lord Esau, and he's coming behind us.'" He also instructed the second and third and all the others who followed the herds. "You are to say the same thing to Esau when you meet him. And be sure to say, 'Your servant Jacob is coming behind us.' For he thought, 'I will pacify him with these gifts I'm sending on ahead. And later when I see him, perhaps he will receive me.'" So like I said, Jacob, he is a smart guy. And he's giving this large gift to Esau, but he's smart in the way that he sends it as well. How does that improve his situation? Well, if Esau is coming with these men and they're setting up for ambush, right? That first group comes out, everybody comes out, "Charge!" "Oh, no, wait a minute, it's not Jacob. It's all these, who's all this livestock belong? Oh, it's Jacob's. Oh, it's mine. Oh, okay. All right, guys, let's take care of these. Let's get them all right. Now, all right, back to your hiding spades. Here comes another one. Charge! All right. Hey, oh, no, it's another group of livestock. Who does this? Oh, this is Jacob's too. Okay, all right. After that happening a couple times, their military readiness is going to be down. Plus, they have to take care of all this livestock. They're not going to be quiet. You're not going to be able to sneak up on you. Jacob is very, very shrewd in all of this. More than that, I think Jacob was counting on these repeated acts of humility to wear Esau's anger down. I think it's pretty amazing how disarming humility can be, can it? Verse 21, so Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him. Still, there is no guarantee that this is going to pacify Esau. Remember what Jacob did to Esau. He stole the birthright. He stole the blessing. He stole the double portion of the inheritance. He stole the right to be leader of the family. You and I both know that with some offenses, it's not just a matter of repairing the damage or replacing what's lost. It's not that simple. And you also know that time doesn't heal all wounds. If you allow that root of bitterness to take hold, then it becomes worse with time. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And maybe that's what's happening. So there's no guarantee that he is going to dodge his brother's wrath. Verse 21, so Jacob's gifts went on ahead of him, but he himself spent the night in camp. And something very interesting happens. Verse 22, that night Jacob got up and took his 2 sons, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford at Jabbok. After he'd sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone. Jacob is alone on the frontiers of the promised land. I mean, that had to be deja vu all over again for Jacob. He absolutely had to be thinking about that night he was out on his own after leaving home. And he was alone. He was afraid. And he has to wrestle with his fear here. That's not all he wrestles with. It says, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When we read on, we find out this wasn't just a man, this was an angel who represented God. So this is kind of strange. This angel appears and wrestles with Jacob till daybreak. Part of me is wondering, what did that look like? Jacob was 77, remember, when he left the promised land. 20 years later, he's now 97 years old. What kind of wrestling match is this going to be? If it was a bowling match, I could understand that. When I was in Sturgis, I bowled with a guy who was 96 years old, and he wiped the floor with me. Put up a 237 on me, 96 years old. But they're not bowling here. They are wrestling. It's not just a physical contest, it's a spiritual contest as well. Evidently, God is trying to get Jacob to do something, but Jacob, we know him by now, right? He is stubborn. He's not known for giving in. He's known for outmaneuvering people and getting what he wants, of outlasting him. And so verse 25, when the man saw that he could not overpower him, Jacob just would not give in. Whatever God was trying to get him to do, he just would not do it. He would not admit he was outmatched, It's just a flesh wound. No. Listen, God will invite us. God will direct us. God will command us. God will even wrestle with us. But he won't force us. He will not force us. And so after this angel, after a whole night of trying to get Jacob to do what God wanted him to do, he decided, okay, not going to happen. He decides, time to end this. He touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that the hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Again, he could have ended this at any time. And then the man said, let me go, for it's daybreak. I have no idea what that has to do with anything. But then Jacob's tune changes all of a sudden, all right? Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. It's a shift of posture from this to that. Folks, there's a difference between fighting God and clinging to God. Now remember that this struggle with this angel, it was ultimately a struggle with God. And Jacob won't give in, and Jacob won't give up. No, I want to get God to do what I want to do. But at the prospect of God leaving, his tune changes. No, wait, fine. I know that my hopes and dreams, it looks like they're going to come crashing down. And maybe I'm not going to like my future, but I cannot face my future without you. Do not go unless you bless me. Folks, this was the breakthrough moment for Jacob. Kind of similar to what his grandfather Isaac went, but it's really the flip side of this. But here, Jacob, he chose faith over having it his way. And he made the right choice. He held on to God. But that's what vintage faith does. Vintage faith holds on to God. There's a difference between fighting God and clinging to him. How does this apply to us? I doubt very many of us are going to end up in a wrestling match with an angel. But I'm guessing all of us at one point have fought God. We know what God wanted us to do, and those promptings wouldn't go away, but we wouldn't give up. We were going to try to outlast him, right? Vintage faith doesn't do that. Quits the fight, and it holds on to God. Now, what that looked like in Abraham's life, that meant letting go of everything and saying, God, you could have whatever you ask for, even if it's my son. I'm letting go. For Jacob, it meant holding on. No matter what, I am clinging to you. And so, take inventory of your life for a few moments here. And are there any ways where you are fighting God? And maybe it's this situation where you know what you want, and maybe even God promised this to you, but the way things are playing out, it's not looking like it's going to happen. You're angry with God. Maybe you've even told him so. You are angry with him. So you've been fighting him. In the back of your mind, you know you need to yield. You know you need to trust. The amazing thing is that he will not force us to surrender. He could, just like that. Scariest thing in the world is when it comes to the point God says, okay, I'm going to stop prompting you now. You can have it your way. You go your own way. Good luck. But I won't be with you. Scariest thing in the world. If you would stop fighting and start holding on to him, no matter what. If you would choose him over the guarantees, then what happens is that then God really becomes God in your life and not a genie. And when you trust God on that level, it leaves room then for God to do what only God can do and for him to act in some unexpected ways. See how that played out in the rest of Jacob's life. Where do you need to hold on to him right now instead of fighting with him? And there are no guarantees with how it's going to turn out. If there were guarantees, then it wouldn't involve faith, would it? But whatever you're going to face, God will be with you, and that'll be worth it. That's what we want you to experience. We want you to know the peace and the strength of having him with you through all things.